up. Most of New Hampshire's school children are heading back to the classroom. While they weathered the pandemic threat as best they could last school year and have some experience, this year features additional uncertainty due to the Delta variant of COVID-19. Here this morning to discuss that and some important policy developments is Education Commissioner Frank Edelblut. Commissioner, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Adam. Thanks for having me.
So, Commissioner, a lot of communities wrestling right now over whether kids should be required to wear masks in school. Where do you stand on this issue?
So when we're trying to bring our students back into the learning environment, the most important thing is to make sure that we have a safe environment. And we learned a lot last year about how to do that. And we've demonstrated really in a lot of places across the state that we can safely conduct instruction. And the way that we do that is through a layering of mitigating factors, mitigating protocols that make sure that the learning environment is going to be effective. And so what's really interesting is I do know that the mask debate has taken front and center in so many of these conversations, when really we need to not be talking about one mitigating factor, but all of the mitigating factors and how they come together to provide that protective instructional environment for our students. And so I would encourage people when they're looking at these issues to start with, as an example, the screening process to make sure that we're not bringing ill students into our schools. Students who are sick should be staying home because I guarantee when they're at home, they won't be able to infect their classmates. So that is an important, mitigating protocol that we have. We've got different vaccination rates in their different learning environments as well, both for our educators as well as some of our students. Some of our school environments have the ability still, even when they're fully in person, to be able to maintain some social distancing or to coordinate around, cohorting as well. And so masks is just one of many different mitigating factors. And it's interesting that it's taken such a front and center place here in New Hampshire, when really in a lot of other parts of the world, it is not so. It is such that, face coverings, for example, in the UK, the government just came out with some guidance for their schools, and they said face coverings are no longer advised for pupils that are in their classroom. And so we have to just look seriously at how we can do this safely. We've done it safely. I know we can get it done. And in fact, we've already demonstrated it. We've got schools that are open and are operating today. So we're excited to be getting our kids back into that learning environment.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like you talk about it in totality with all of those things together. That's what happened last year, and the schools that did go back proved it could be done safely to do in-classroom instruction and make it happen for these kids, which was so important. Why change any element of that, though, when we did have that winning formula moving forward?
So I don't ever even see a change. In other words, I'm not sure what change you're referring to.
If you say that masks are no longer needed, there was success at least last year under these conditions. I'm just wondering, why change things up if you have something that seemed to work last year, especially in the face of what the governor says could be an even bigger spike in October?
Could be a bigger spike in October. And in terms of a change, some of our learning environments had different masking protocols. So not everyone had the same policy in terms of their mitigating strategies across the state. So again, each district needs to begin to look at it and understand what is going to work in their particular community to be able to conduct school safely. And again, the other thing you have to keep in mind, Adam, is, again, we've learned over the year how to do this. We've seen and gotten information from other countries that are conducting school. So it's not only a winning formula, but it's a formula that allows us to continue to move forward. One of the conversations that is not often held is, what is the downside associated with masks? What are the long-term implications for our students in terms of their social emotional health and the well-being of not having that facial context in that learning environment as well? And so I think what we need to do is just, again, we know we can construct safe learning environments across our state. And they're going to look different depending on the different circumstances in those communities. And I think we need to continue to drive towards that.
I'm curious for your level of concern over the Delta variant, because I think that's what has some parents kind of, I don't want to say freaking out, but really kind of very concerned about the safety of their children. This quote coming from a pediatric epidemiologist in Tennessee, where they're seeing a big spike. Quote, "It's important for everyone to know we're seeing sicker kids, seeing more kids admitted with actual COVID illness, and those kids, some of them are in ICU, some of them are intubated." So what's your level of concern that Delta could be a game changer and kind of force you to, change things up even again when October, November comes around?
Well, we've already demonstrated in New Hampshire that we have a very flexible system. We keep a close eye on how things are going, and we will be able to move nimbly as those circumstances change, and if we need to do something that's different. And I'm not going to, like that an epidemiologist has far more experience around these kinds of issues than I do, but I do work closely with Dr. Chan and our Department of Public Health to make sure that the policies and the recommendations that are coming from public health can be implemented effectively in our learning environments to keep our students safe. And so we are watching New Hampshire more than we are watching necessarily every other state because of the circumstances that are different here in New Hampshire.
Commissioner, is there a read on how many teachers are vaccinated statewide? Obviously, that's going to play into how much in-classroom instruction time is available as well.
So again, another variable that changes from district to district and something that should be considered as districts are working on their reopening plans, what that's going to look like. There are some communities, and if you go out to public health, you can see some community vaccination rates. And we have communities that have high vaccination rates, some that are lower, and those may be some of the considerations that people look at when they decide what that opening plan looks like, what the types of mitigating strategies that they might implement.
But you don't have any data in terms of district to district. That's not something you are able to collect.
I do not have it by vocation to say just by teachers. I do not. I mean, I can tell you anecdotally, I've heard numbers in the 80 to 85% range, but that's just anecdotally.
Of course, if parents don't like the way things are going in their school district or in their particular school, they now have options thanks to school choice and the education freedom accounts. How many of those EFAs do you expect to be able to fund in the next few months, Commissioner?
Well, we have the ability to fund any that individuals sign up for. We expect that there will be not a overwhelming number of these. Maybe there will be 1,000 or 1,500 students that are going to participate in that. Is some of the initial read. But at this point in time, we don't have any applications that have been adjudicated. We just have individuals who've expressed interest. And I think what we have to keep in mind is relative to programs like this is I think the way that this program is structured with our means test, so this is available only to families that are 300% of the federal poverty level or below. That is about 70,000 students that might reach some type of eligibility. But what we find with these programs in other states that have been around for a long time is that it really helps the students on the fringe, the students on the edge, the students where the current learning environment is not working for them, and so they need something else. And so I suspect that here in New Hampshire, it will play out the same way, that what we will see is the students who need an option are going to be the ones who are going to opt into that.
One of the issues raised recently by the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules involved whether or not these EFAs would be considered taxable income by the IRS. I think this is your old area of expertise in accounting. So can you put on that old hat? Are these families going to potentially have to pay taxes on what they receive for the EFA?
So we are looking into that to determine whether or not they would be paying taxes. One of the difficult questions that you have to consider when you're looking at this is what is the rest of the family's financial picture? We know that these families are going to be at 300% of the federal poverty level or below, which would obviously put them in a very low tax bracket to begin with, but we don't know the other circumstances relative to their economic picture. So it's difficult to say, give a blanket statement about the taxability or non-taxability of those funds.
We know this pandemic has been hard on school kids across the board, but do you have any data yet on the number of kids who are substantially behind, say almost didn't make any progress at all within their grade level in the last year of education?
So we did run an assessment in the spring, and we expect to have those results in the October timeframe, which is normally when we're able to turn those around. Preliminary results seem to indicate that in the English language arts area, kids pretty much stayed level. And in the mathematics areas where we saw some decline. And I call those preliminary because what we really need to do is to unpack the results and understand who participated in that assessment. We typically have about 95% student participation in our assessment. With regard to this assessment, we hit in probably the 82% type range. And so what we need to understand is who did not participate, because that may skew what those results tell us. If we had a bunch of high performers who did not participate, that will tell us one thing. If low performing students didn't participate, that will tell us another thing. So I would expect in the October timeframe that we will be releasing those results and have good visibility into, how last year went.
Curious to see how that plays out there. A lot going on in education right now. I want to touch on at least one more thing before we wrap up here. Schools are operating under the new state law that is aimed at restricting or banning critical race theory and diversity training and education. Lawyers have said that the language in that law is ambiguous, so I'm looking for something specific here. Under the new law, do you think a teacher should lose their license if they teach that systemic racism exists in the United States?
So anytime we face any kind of a circumstance like that, we're going to have to look at it individually. We have, through the Department of Justice, the Human Rights Commission, and the Department of Education, put out specific guidance so that educators can feel comfortable as they move forward and they try to figure out what it is that they should be teaching students. And through that guidance that we put out, it's clear that teachers are able to, teach history, teach students about the important things that have happened in this country that really every citizen should know and have a good understanding of. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we're respecting those boundaries. But if there are educators who are concerned about a particular curricular material or something like that, they can reach out to the department and we can take a look at that for them and provide feedback for them on that. If you think that it is on the edge of not being allowable, then I would reference the guidance that we put together, that technical advisory, and encourage them to go take a look at that, because I think the technical advisory lays out some very clear boundaries for educators to be able to really engage our students in meaningful ways to understand the complete history of New Hampshire and the United States.
So you think there should be, I guess it's a case-by-case basis as you see it. There's no bright line that says right and wrong.
There's not a bright line. The bright line that we have and that we all share is that we are not discriminating against one another, whether that is in the classroom or outside of the classroom, that would apply. And so we really want to make sure that we're teaching our students about racism, but not to be racist, right? So there's something that we can do there. And that's not different than many of the other instructional areas that we work in.
All right, Commissioner Frank Edelblut, thank you so much for your time on Close Up.
Thank you.